Hello and welcome to part 25 of my video series on how to use Blender 2.6. In this video I'm going to cover one of the most common questions that I get, and that is, how do you animate a parent-child relationship? Why would you want to do that? Well, let's say that you have a character and you want the character to pick something up and hold it in their hand and then put it back down again. What you wouldn't want to have to do is animate the object that they pick up separately to follow exactly where their hand is moving. What you'd like to do is be able to have that object be a child of the hand object or the hand bone if you're using a skeleton. But in order for that to work, you'd have to have the object be able to turn off the influence to the hand when the object is not being picked up by the hand. In other words, when it's sitting on the table or sitting somewhere and not being affected by the moving object, then you don't want it to be influenced as a child. But when you have the object picked up, or maybe it's gum stuck to the bottom of somebody's shoe, a character or a piece of gum is sitting on the ground, a character walks by, steps on the gum, and the gum is suddenly then, from that point on, attached to the bottom of the character's foot. Well, we can do that in Blender. So let's go ahead and quickly talk about parent-child relationships again. If you haven't seen the video on linking and joining, I put the link up on the screen right now so that you can see it. But basically what parent-child linking is when you have two objects. I'll create a second object. I'll make a monkey and press R. And so it's facing us. That's the Suzanne monkey head. And I'm going to make that a child of the cube. So I'll have the monkey head selected. I'll hold shift and right click the box and then press Control P and click Set Parent to Object. And when you make a parent-child object, one object is a child, one object is a parent, and you'll see a dotted line in most cases go from the child to the parent. And when you move the parent, in this case the box, the child moves with it, but they still are separate meshes. So basically, wherever the parent goes, the child follows. But the child can also move separately. It can move around it. So you can think of it like planets, like the moon and the earth. Wherever the earth goes, the moon follows. But the moon is free to orbit around the earth, which it does. So that's parent-child relationships again. I'll put the link on the screen so that you guys can look at my joining and linking movies or lesson. So let's go ahead and make a arm for it to pick up an object. I'm going to make a bone or a structure of a claw essentially, and that's going to pick up and put down an object. So I'm going to make a new bone. I made a video on bones and rigging 101. So if you haven't seen that video, I'll put the link up on the screen right now. So we're going to make an armature. Now, normally with an armature, you would make a mesh. In other words, what the character looks like or what the claw looks like. But I'm just going to use the bone, and having a mesh there is totally arbitrary to this lesson. So I would, of course, make a mesh claw, but in this case I won't. Alright, I'm going to make a claw, so I'm going to take this big large bone that I just made. In fact, I will turn on my display of my keys. I keep on forgetting that. And I'm going to press, with the bone selected in edit mode, I'll press W and subdivide and turn the cuts up to 2 cuts, so we have 3 bones. And then we'll make a kind of a claw coming out of here with 3 kind of talons with little claws coming out. So I'm going to press E to extrude out, and I'm going to shoot 1 claw up. But what you'll notice is that when I extruded the claw up, it got twisted. You'll see that all the bones in this line are nicely kind of perpendicular to my my view. I can see the exact side only of them. But this one is twisted in some kind of weird angle. And we can fix that. So you can always fix the roll. That's called the roll of a bone by pressing Control N with the bone selected in edit mode. And then you can recalculate the roll after you press Control N on any of the 3 axes, and I think it'll be the Z axis in this case that will work. So now it's perpendicular to me exactly, so do the same thing again. I'll press E and extrude down. But in this case, I'm going to press 3 to go to my side view. We don't want it to be exactly straight down. We're going to make kind of 3 in a triangle shape, so I'm going to move that bone over there. I'm going to do the same thing again, go to that the tail of this last bone in the arm, and press E, and then make it match that one pretty much. And then move it from the side view. I'll move it kind of to be in that triangle shape. So we'll move it over here. And are my bones rolled correctly? Well, let's see. I'm going to select that one, press Control N. We'll recalculate that roll. I think this time it's going to be not on the Z-axis. That doesn't look right to me. So I'm going to press Control N. I believe it's the X-axis in that case. You can just try all three X, Y, and Z, or Z, and one of them should look pretty good. In this case, it was the X-axis. I'm not exactly sure why, but that's just the way it is for my bones. I'm going to select these tips, and or the tail sections of the bones, and press E, and then X to extrude little claws out. And there we go. I could change the display of my bones. One of the nicer displays for bones, or just for the look of them when you're working with them, is under the, I believe it's under the object data, or the little person tab, is the B-bone option, which makes your bones look like basically square prisms or rectangular prisms. And right now they're too fat, they're too thick. So if I go into edit mode and select a bone, or in fact select all of them, so press A and then A, I can press Control Alt S and then move my mouse in or out, and that'll make them thin or skinny. I could go back to octahedral ones, but I will stick with B bones today. There's no effect on how the bones work or how the bones influence by changing this view, but just what you prefer. Alright, so I'm going to animate this claw picking up an object. Let's go ahead and make that object. But what I might actually do in object mode is move my claw up so I have the object right on my kind of ground mesh, which doesn't really exist, but we'll put it there. So there's my claw. It's going to be right there to start. And I'm going to make a UV sphere, or actually, yeah, let's do a UV sphere for the claw to pick up. I'm going to simplify that UV sphere a little bit, just because it's a good habit to do. 16 and 12, sure. Maybe 16 by 10 would be more square. Okay. I'm going to scale that down so the claw can actually pick it up and put it right on my ground. Check it from the side view. Sure, that looks pretty good. So I'm going to save this to my desktop. Let's go, and on my desktop, I'm going to call this claw_01. And to animate bones, you have to be in pose mode. So with the bone selected, I will change my object mode to pose mode. And when you're in pose mode, the bones turn or have a blue outline. So I'm going to select all the bones. And to make my very first keyframe, because we want the bones to start off in this position, I'm going to press I and select Locrot Scale, which is location rotation scale, excuse me. And we do that because we don't want to have to move the bones to make the very first keyframe on frame 1, which we're on right now. We want to just have them be there. And so to make a keyframe, normally you'd have to turn on the record button and then jiggle them a little bit or rotate them or something. But if you just do I, that lets you insert a keyframe without having to move the object. All right, so we're going to have the claw kind of lurch up, pick up the, grab down and pick up the ball, pick it up, shake it, put it back down again, and then move the arm back up. So let's go to frame 10, and I'm going to make it kind of arch up first, but kind of bend while it's arching a little bit. So on frame 10, it's going to arch up a little bit, and then on frame 20, approximately, I'm not going to do a very good animation here. Let's do that one up. It's just going to be a kind of quick and dirty animation. So at frame 30, we're now making it arch up even more, and the claw is going to be most pointed down. And then on frame 40, it's going to kind of be coming in. And going to grab, let's see what it does. Yeah, I would have had it arch up more, but I'm going to ignore my perfectionism right now. Let's have it grab it right. Almost. Ideally, I would have put the ball right about right there instead of right there because it's kind of far away for that claw to grab. Actually, I'm going to turn off my record button, and we're going to move it right there because I haven't made any keyframes for it yet. So I turned off my record button so I didn't accidentally make the ball have a keyframe. And we'll go back to the bones, and that's right there. Let's rotate that bone right there, and then have it come straight down. Whoops, I didn't have record turned on. I'll turn record on first. There we go. I didn't record those last few keyframes because I didn't have my record button pressed in, or my automatic keyframe button. That's what that one's actually called. Okay, so it is going to pick up the ball. A few frames later, let's move this one down, and then right about there would be good. Maybe a little bit up, a little bit down. Okay, perfect. So we are around the object. If I can press 1, that would be nice. Okay. So at this point, we'd want the ball to be a child of one of the bones. Probably, in fact, this bone right here, because that's kind of like the palm of our claw. We don't want to have it to one of the actual claw pieces necessarily. We'd probably want to have it towards the one that is most like the palm of the hand of the claw. But we're just going to continue animating, so we'll kind of pause at that position for a second in order for the claw to have time to pick up the ball. So I'm going to go a few frames later, zoom out if my computer will let me, press A then A, and then we're going to insert a keyframe for all of those bones, location, rotation, and scale. Alright, let's go a few frames later, and let's start moving the claw up. Mostly just this top one, I think. And good animation principle states that you'd want this one to kind of follow in the direction that it just came from. So we'll make it rotate to face down as it's being moved up, so it maintains the same direction for a little while at least. So when I rotate this one, I'm going to have to correct it on the palm one until a bit later. And so it's gone up. I'm going to have it go a few frames later, and we'll have the claw shake the ball around just to really prove that it's attached. Okay, it's proven it, so it's going to shake the ball around, and we'll make it go put the ball back down, probably in a different spot. So I'm going to animate it, putting that down. So I'll put that one like that, and then we'll move that one down, that one down. We'll make that one a little bit more in. And so now, not a very good animation. Let's maybe make that one up. That one up. Yeah. Pretty terrible. Actually, what I'm going to do is put that one over there. And that will kind of make it go to its final resting position. Let's go to right about, actually move that one up. And maybe we'll have the ball drop a little bit. So it's going to, that's a really bad animation. Okay, I'm going to have the ball drop a little bit to the ground for the last little part. So we've got our claw animation done. Actually, we're going to make it stay in that position for a sec. So a few frames later, after the last keyframe, I'll press I. Actually, that's U. I, low quote scale. And then we'll make the claw animate, releasing, and a few frames later we'll make it go back up. Alright, so the ball is going to be picked up, be shaken around, and then it's going to get put back down again or dropped. And then we could go in and we could have the claw be animated. So maybe right about there, it would probably kind of open its palm more, like a character greedily grabbing towards an object. It would kind of open up before it closes down. So I'm going to select that claw piece and rotate it so that it is open more. But you'll notice that my gizmo doesn't really give me the axis I need to rotate that claw. We'd like the claw to exactly kind of rotate perpendicular to the way that it's facing. We want it to rotate basically, if I were to press R right now, it would do the job properly. We want to rotate kind of exactly the way that it's turned, but the axes are still with the global axes. And the way that we can fix this, or on a gizmo rather, the way that we can fix this is to change the orientation of our gizmo. Right now it's set to global orientation, which means no matter how we turn the object, the gizmo always follows the exact axes of our world. But if my computer will let me undo, that would be nice. If we change the orientation of the gizmo, so I'm going to select one of the claws. Where are we in our animation? I just got lost a little bit in my train of thought. So right about there, we want it to open up a little bit. So I'm going to change my gizmo orientation by going to this right next to the gizmo types. I'm going to go to change global to normal. And you'll see how my gizmo changed its orientation. Now actually matched the bone's orientation. So now this red axis, this red hoop, now is the one that I can use to open up the claw really nicely. So I'm going to rotate the claw. I have animation turned on. Again, now that I have it turned to normal, or my gizmo turned to normal, the rotation will be a lot easier to do. So the only problem is that I have to go back a few frames and make it not open again. So I'm going to rotate it maybe even more inward than I had it before. There we go. So it's going to start really it's going to move in and then spread all the way out. And then maybe right there, we're going to have it even more like it's being dragged by the wind or by the inertia of its own movement. So right about there, we'll still have it kind of be up or open. And sure, these claws don't really fit very well, but so be it. Maybe right about here. I'm not going to really go into that. So the claw shakes around the ball, puts it back down again. So I'm going to select these claw pieces, and because we still want them to be rotated exactly as they are before it opens back up again, right before it lets go, right about there, right at frame 140, let's say, we're going to press I to insert a keyframe for them all right there, and then go a few frames later. I'll use my arrow keys on my keyboard, and before it lifts back up, we want it to open back up again. So I'll select that bone, rotate it out, select this bone, rotate it out, and select this bone and rotate it out. So the claw should go in and let go, and the ball should get dropped. And then the claw is free to kind of close up naturally again after it lets go of the ball, after it's away from the ball. Not sure why that claw is so much longer than the other ones. Interesting. Okay, so all we have to do now is allow the ball to follow along with the claw when we want it to. And the way that we're going to do that, I'll go back to my front view, is to make or use what's called object constraint. So I'm going to click on the sphere, which currently has no keyframes. It's just kind of sitting there. And I'm going to go over to my properties window. And this little chain link tab is called the object constraints tab. And this lets us create relationships between different objects. This is also how we can add inverse kinematics to a bone structure if we were to want to do that, which I haven't covered yet in any of my videos. So the object constraint is kind of like a modifier. We can turn it off and on, we can keep it. But the most powerful thing is that we can change its influence. In other words, we can change whether it totally influences, like a parent-child relationship, or only halfway influences. But the most powerful thing is that we can animate its influence as well. So I'm going to add a constraint to this to the ball, and it's going to be the child of constraint. So we're going to make it a child of another object. The object that we're going to make it a child of is this palm or hand bone. So I'm going to actually name that bone first. So I'll go back to that bone, go to the bone tab, which is there when you have a bone selected, and change it from bone.001 to hand. That's now the name of that particular bone. Go back to the ball and the constraints and choose the target for the child of constraint, which is going to be the parent. So I'm going to select the armature first because the bone name hand is in armature. You'll also notice that when you choose armature, your ball gets all messed up. It moves, but we'll fix that. Don't worry about that right now. I'm going to select the bone named hand, and of course it moves again. And now it's totally being controlled by that hand bone. But of course it's in the wrong spot, and we haven't animated it yet. The way that we can fix that position is by clicking one of these two buttons under the child of constraint options in the properties window under the object constraints tab. These two buttons basically fix most of our problems with this with the object moving when it's not supposed to. So I'm going to press set inverse, and that fixed it. That put the ball back where it was supposed to be. You can also press clear inverse and then set inverse, or really just play with those two buttons to see what they do. Those will fix most of your problems, I think. So at the very start of the movie, we do not want the influence to be 1. We want it to be 0. So what we're actually going to have to do is animate this value. This is a slider that we can slide up and down between 0 and 1, but we're going to animate it. And how you animate one of these kind of slide, drag, slide window things is you put your mouse in it, and you're going to create a keyframe in there. So you'll put your mouse right over top, don't click, and just press the I key. And that turned it yellow, and it also gave it a keyframe over here. So now we have a keyframe of the influence of that hand bone on the ball at 1, but we want to be at 0. So I'm going to turn it all the way down to 0. In fact, we will also turn the keyframe if the keyframing is turned on. So that was good, as long as we know that it's turned on. So now we have a keyframe. Maybe I'll just press I again, and that made sure that keyframe was at 0 and not 1. And now we can move the timeline, and the influence is still at 0. We want it to be 0 all the way up until basically frame 64. So from frame 0 to 63, we want it to be at 0, the influence, and then at frame 64, we want to automatically snap up to 1. So we have to actually do this in kind of 2 steps. We're going to go back to frame 63, where we still want it to be 0. So I'm going to go use my arrow keys and go back to 63. You'll notice how it changed right there, because I pressed my arrow key. And we're going to press I again with our mouse over top of this word influence. So I'll press I to make a keyframe. It made a keyframe at frame 63. I will actually save this file again before I go any further. So it's still at 0. And as soon as we get to frame 63, that turns yellow instead of green. Green means that there are keyframes on the object, but not at that current frame. So it turns green. That means there is a keyframe somewhere on that object of the influence value, just not on that frame. We can actually, I'll show this to you right now, we can make a dope sheet window. And if we click on the little arrow next to the ghost, it only shows us the object that we have selected, which is the ball in this case, which is nice. So you can turn the arrow button on to only show the keyframes of the selected object. And you can actually see the keyframes for the influence. So you can delete keyframes if you mess up of the influence. You'll see the influence child of constraint is right there. So you can, of course, edit those keyframes. On frame 64, so we'll go 1 frame later, I'll press the right arrow. We're on frame 64 now. We want the influence to be on. So I'm going to turn it all the way up to 1. And you notice that it got messed up in its position. So I'm going to press clear inverse and then set inverse. And it went back to the right position as far as I can tell. So it gets picked up, and it gets shaken around. So all is good right now. You'll see the keyframes flicker yellow when I go past them. But now we have to put the ball back down again, and this is the tricky part. We also have to animate the ball falling a little bit, but one problem is that let's say that's the very last keyframe, frame 141, we still want it to be attached. So we're going to go over to the influence value and press I, and we want it to be at 1 at that point because it's still attached. But then at the very next keyframe, at frame 142, so the previous one was 141 with the keyframe. We do not want it to be attached to frame 142. So I'm going to go over there, or over the influence value, press I, and then turn it down. But notice that it gets messed up. It moves again. And you can try pressing clear inverse and set inverse, but unfortunately, after you unattach an object or detach an object from the claw, these two buttons do not work. You'll have to just kind of position it or animate it, make a keyframe of it back in the same spot, or back in the right spot. Now there's a wrong way and a right way to do this. I'm going to save my file first. The wrong way to do it would just be to animate it back in the right position, because we have keyframing turned on right now, or if we don't, you can turn it on. You could just press G and put it back and then check it from a different angle, but then what would happen is, because that would be the very first time that you had made a keyframe for that object would now be offset by a little bit to the left and a little bit up for the entire previous section of the movie. I'll save again, and I'll show you what I mean. Everything looks good. Oops, I'm going to go back to that previous keyframe and press clear inverse, set inverse. I believe. Ooh, no, we have to go back and set these again. There we go. You will have to play around with these clear inverse, set inverse buttons to make your animation work, but I promise that it will work most of the time. So on frame 142, we have to fix the position. The wrong way to do it would just be to grab it and put it back in the right position with the keyframing turned on, because that would be the very first time that you'd be changing the location, rotation, and scale of that object. In other words, now that we've set that, the entire rest of the animation will be off. You'll see how the ball is now in the wrong position from frame 1 because we moved it left and up for the entire thing because there's only one keyframe there. The way to not do that, or to do it correctly, is we're actually going to undo. So the ball, we still have that problem again. It gets it shifts over. Is to go to that frame where we want to be in the right position. Then go one frame before that. So we're on frame 142 right now. We'll go to frame 141. And it's in the right position. That's great, but we want to make a keyframe of it in the right position. So I'm going to press, with that selected, press I, and then loc-rot scale, location, rotation, scale. So now we've set that ball to be in that position at that particular time. So now I can actually scrub through. Everything will be fine and dandy. But at the very last frame, where the ball is still attached, we have a keyframe, as you can see on the dope sheet. Let's go one frame later, and it's in the wrong position, but because we have a keyframe right before it, it's not going to mess up all the previous frames. So I'm going to put it back in the right position. I'll press G, put it right there, approximately. Check my view. Let's kind of toggle back and forth. I could put it up, but actually we want it to drop, so that looks pretty good. And the problem is solved. It'll let go and it'll be there. So that's how you do that. You're going to have to make two keyframes to fix the letting go of the object. But this is still a whole lot better than animating the ball separately and making it always be within the claw. That is going to will take a lot of time, and it would be difficult to look very good. So in this case, I'm going to make the ball drop down. So I'll go a few frames later, and we will use our move gizmo. I'm going to turn it back to global, so we're actually moving it straight down. And let's see how that looks. I'll press Alt-A to play. Maybe I'll move those ones down a little bit so it falls a little bit slower. Let's just watch our animation. So I'm going to go back, zoom out. In fact, we'll just use our timeline. And I'll press Alt-A, so the claw reaches down, grabs the ball, shakes it, and puts it, or drops it, and the animation continues. Alright, that's it for this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.